Shift happens, sometimes by choice, sometimes by circumstance. And when it does, you have two options. You can either cling to the life you've outgrown or step into the version of you that knows she's meant for more. I'm Gia Lacqua, trauma-informed empowerment coach and founder of Radical Prioritization. Welcome to What the Shift, the podcast for women who've outgrown the life they've built and are ready to create one that finally fits. Here we get real about the shifts that change everything: identity shifts, career pivots, relationship resets, mindset breakthroughs, and learning how to finally release what's holding you back. You don't have to have it all figured out. Just be ready for what's next. It's time to shift. If you feel like life is shifting, you're in the right place. I'm Gia Lacqua, and welcome to What the Shift. Today, I am thrilled to introduce you to Dr. Michelle Khoury, a perinatal well-being expert, published author, and founder of Yogamasia, a maternal and children's wellness education hub. A former pharmaceutical executive with over 20 years in global healthcare experience, Michelle now helps career-driven individuals navigate the transition from pregnancy to parenthood with presence through her signature Smart Journey to Parenting, a practical, mindful framework that blends science, strategy, and lived wisdom. Michelle, welcome to the show. So happy to have you join us today.
Happy to be here.
So tell us, I think we have some similar backgrounds,
Yes.
having been in the pharmaceutical industry and transitioned out. Tell us a little bit about your story and your background and what led you to the work you're doing today.
Yes. So as you mentioned, I spent quite a number of years, 20 plus years in the pharmaceutical industry. And when I started that career, I didn't have children. You're sort of going along the lines of what we typically think that we're supposed to be doing. You go to college and you get the job and you start to sort of move along, getting those experiences. But my first birth was one that was not as prepared, I would say, as I usually am, given the jobs that we do. And, there was no plan. I didn't really use my voice in a way that I should have. And that then led me to want something different when I had my second. And that led me to yoga and mindfulness techniques. And so the second experience, paved the way for the third experience. I ended up having a little bit more knowledge and instilling more practices that were a little bit better. But along the way, because again, this is 20 plus years, having 3 kids and trying to keep the job, get the promotion, achieve all the milestones. And I ended up having my own health journeys. I have a heart diagnosis that I manage. There was anxiety and depression in between. And then my eldest daughter at the time was struggling with her own mental health crisis. And, that is where I think the point, you follow the signs along the way. But at that point, I just said, okay, maybe there's a shift that needs to occur, which is why I love your title. And I walked away from all of it. 20 plus years, 6-figure job, annual bonus, all the things that come with that to, work on, okay, what is it that, I, as a parent, as a mother with my kids, and what does my purpose look like? Because I did one side of it and I did the other side of it, but they just weren't blending together. And now I feel like it blends together, because that shift, it happens when you get the disruption. And that's what happened with me.
I love that. I love that because we do all the things we're supposed to do and check the boxes. And then suddenly we realize we're not really in alignment with who we are and what we want. I think that happens to so many of us. So beautifully stated. I love how you talk about, not having used your voice, and we'll get into that a little bit more, and following the signs along the way. Also something very hard to do. So I know you say that you walked away from you also say it was a shift. I do like to think of it as a pivot, a shift, or we were redirected in life to a greater purpose and calling. And I would love to know, because obviously you and I both know firsthand how incredibly difficult and scary that process is. Tell us a little bit about what the hardest part was for you and what had to shift inside of you in order to make that happen.
The hardest part was, of course, accepting the fact that you're no longer in this what is defined as stability, right? Having a stable income that's coming in, that recurring revenue, and all the benefits that are alongside that. I bootstrapped my business. As a woman, we have our own our own challenges trying to start a business and have, folks support and understand what that alignment is, and what your vision is and what you're looking forward to. Um, but at the same time, I think for me, it was really, really important to get to a point in my life where I knew where I was headed. Because there's a difference, right? You might start your career, you get married, you start to have kids, and you're just kind of going. But at the end of the day, I didn't really have a vision as to what I wanted with all of that. When I had my first child, I was just getting into the the mix of pharma, and you know what that is like, right? You're trying to prove yourself. Your metrics for success are very different. And then at the same time, I was doing my master's. I was going through a divorce with her father. And so there were so many things, and I think I treated them very separately because at the end of the day, I didn't know what I really wanted. I
Mm.
didn't see that long term. And so when I made the shift, the vision was there. I knew what I wanted. I knew where I wanted to go. And my definitions and measures of success just changed. And one of that was the relationship that I had with my kids and what I wanted to do and how it could be done in a way that would make you feel like you're successful.
That is so incredibly powerful because I think I see it in so many women and men that I work with. They are hustling, doing a great job, and because of that they get rewarded. They get promoted. They get the next opportunity. And then I talk to these executives who say to me, when we talk about their development plan and where they're headed in their career, they have no idea because it's always just come very naturally and they've been tapped on the shoulder to do things. But to your point, at what point do we shift from being reactive to being intentional
Yes.
and having that vision and a plan for the life we actually want, not the one that we think we're supposed to have, right?
Exactly. Because we're thinking of it from just one perspective. We think that we have to set these goals only for the career or the professional part of our life. And sometimes we mix the personal with the professional, but having an overall, what does that look like? And I think that was big for me, as you said, the intention. How are we setting that?
Yeah, and we do. We said we sort of are conditioned to segment our lives into pieces, and then we say, okay, well, you should have work life balance. It doesn't work that way. So I love that shift to more of a holistic vision of success and what that looks like for you because it is highly individualized.
Yes, absolutely.
Incredible. So, talk to us. I know a lot of women I talk to, working moms, it's a big shift having children, especially when you are career driven. You have a high powered job, you've committed all of your time and energy to getting to where you are. And then you have kids, and your world changes in various ways. Talk to us a little bit about, from your perspective, what are the biggest myths, or what is the biggest myth about motherhood that we need to debunk?
Well, we've spoken about one, which is having these parallel segmented tracks, as opposed to we are not taught to look at it from an overall, right? And so therefore the myth of being able to balance it all would not be, that's not achievable because we weren't taught to do that. And I think for me, that goes back to the overall, like I said, what is our intention? So we have the job, right? We have our successful careers and we've now settled down and we're married and we said, okay, we're going to have kids and we have the kid or we have the kids and we're all sort of just living these lives as opposed to, okay, I know I have these goals that I want for my career. What does that look like even before we have kids? So even when we're pregnant or planning, or, we have a lot of people who are going through infertility journeys and therefore they're already thinking they're just getting to the point of, okay, now we're pregnant. But along the way, we need to sort of pause and set that intention. It's like we do in yoga when you go to a yoga class and they say, what is your intention for this practice? And every day we should be setting intentions.
Mhm.
We should be setting those intentions as an overall purpose for, okay, I know I have this job and I know I want to accomplish that. How am I going to get there? And I'll give you an example. I said with my first pregnancy, I had literally just started probably a couple, 3 to 4 years into my career. And at the same time, I was up for promotion. Taking leave would have obviously affected that. And so my goal at the time was, okay, I'm going to have this baby and then I'm going to go back to work and then I'm going to get promoted and life will be great. Without the preparation that I had for that pregnancy, that the birth was not ideal. And the postpartum was also not ideal. And, there are so many different tangents that we could go off onto with that. But, by the time I got with my second, I was a little bit more intentional. And by my third, I absolutely knew where I wanted to go. So with my first, I gave up on breastfeeding. I sort of just did the thing, went back, even though I was not mentally, emotionally, or physically well. You ignore all of those signs. You move into, okay, now with my second, I was a little bit more prepared. Things didn't go 100% as planned, but I was more intentional about how I wanted to deal with things and the support that was around me in that. So as I said with my third, I was back to work in 8 weeks because I knew I was going to have to be back to work in 8 weeks. And therefore, long before I had her, I had to start really thinking about, okay, I want to be good in this job. I want to do this thing. But at the same time, I have to be able to figure out how is this going to work as opposed to us trying to think on the moment, which is what happens with us, right? We
Mhm.
are always reacting versus responding intentionally to the things that come up in our lives. And so with her, one of the things, this job that I had at the time, I was a regional leader and I had to travel to like 55 plus countries. So I was gone 80% of the time. That's a lot. It's really a lot. It's like literally just having a bag ready to go on the spot. You come home, hi, kiss the kids, go back. And breastfeeding was really big to me at that time. And some of the opportunities or support systems that are in place today were not in place then with her. So I literally set out to, okay, I'm going to find someone to help me with this child. My husband also has his career. I'm trying to support him. How are we going to take care of the other two kids? And I need to breastfeed. I am not going to give up on this. And it was literally doing the research. How am I traveling with it? What are the TSA/guidelines? What are the country guidelines? Because not every country has the same. How am I bringing this milk? Calling hotels ahead of time. I need your commercial freezer ready. All of these different things. And I ended up with her for 3 years, breastfeeding her.
Wow.
She stopped when she was ready. And that was something that I really, really intentionally, had a goal and a vision for. But what was very different about that versus the other two is that I made sure that my career worked around it. And so if that meant, butting heads with certain leaders or certain peers or colleagues or, the microaggressions that come into play when you are just trying to do something that you want to do for your child. Not everybody makes the decision, but that was my decision to make. And so it's putting all of that together so that you form a system that works for you and doing it with intention so that you are successful at the end of the day because you plan that journey along the way versus, okay, well, now I have the baby and I have the job and oh, I got to travel. And I could not have really imagined how it would have been if I was really reactive in those moments.
Mhm.
Um, and that's just how we are as leaders in general. So
Yeah.
why not with the same intentional preparation that we do when we're going to take care of a project or, a meeting or whatever, why not do the same thing? And that's basically what it was.
It's so true. It's such a great point that we push through and do whatever needs to be done in order to hit those goals and targets at work. But when it comes to our personal life, what I'm hearing you say, and I think many women resonate with this, is we don't fight as hard when they're our own personal goals and we don't set them in the same way. So I love that you had this personal goal. You were intentional about it. But I think the thing that is most powerful about that story, Michelle, is you didn't give up when you faced adversity. You didn't retreat when you faced a setback or a comment that somebody made. It's very easy for us to say, oh, this isn't well received. I'm not going to do this. Or, calling the hotels, the shipping, we're incredibly resourceful. But if we feel like we're up against resistance and it's something that we want personally, we tend to give up very quickly.
And a lot of that has to do with that mindset, right? The word is thrown around a lot, but at the end of the day, it's really how we are um, preparing ourselves emotionally
Yeah,
for what we're about
absolutely.
to do.
Absolutely.
I
So
think
that's
we're very
incredible.
good at preparing physically,
Yeah.
but emotionally, mentally, that part is a lot. We have to keep working on ourselves continuously. So if I think back over that 20-year span of those three kids, of what I would have allowed, and to your point, the comments, the microaggressions, the lack of support because I didn't speak up,
Yeah.
versus being a little bit more resilient, learning how to have that self-confidence, that self-awareness, and that self-worthiness, because then that makes it good for whatever it is, even if it's not like, this is me breastfeeding, even if it wasn't for me to just have this opportunity to give to my child, whatever other goal it is, you feel so much better about it. But we
Mhm.
have to want it as well. And,
Mhm.
and when I say want it, not want it from an external level, right? Want it from an internal level. Because sometimes we know we have it there, but then we don't believe that we can get it.
So beautifully stated. Love that. So you created the Smart Journey to Parenting program. Tell us a little bit about what that is and how it helps women to navigate that shift from motherhood.
Yeah, so that came, over the years of going through these transitions, because we are constantly going through shifts, right? It's not one shift, it's not one step that we go. I think it's,
Mhm.
understanding that we will constantly be navigating all of these transitions in life. And for me personally, along the way, I learned so much, but I also made so many mistakes that helped with those learnings, but I would absolutely want others to avoid. And so the smart journey to parenting was formed off of those experiences, but then also integrating, my holistic approaches as well as my background in healthcare and what that transition can look like to someone who's navigating into parenthood. And it follows the typical goal setting acronym that we know. And that
Mhm.
comes from my corporate side because funny enough, I absolutely hated setting smart goals. And the
Same.
question, this,
You're
this
not
all,
alone.
this all came up because one day I was sitting down, going through all of these, changes and working with people and all the experiences that I've had. And I said to myself, well, we are so good at setting these smart goals. We have to have this annual performance review based on these smart goals. Why can't we do that for ourselves with what we're experiencing in this very, very critical life transition of becoming a parent? And every year have our own annual review. How are we doing in setting those goals? And so the Smart Journey to Parenting was formed. And so the S stands for setting your vision. What is that intention that you want to achieve and accomplish alongside all of the tracks of your life, not just having kids, your partnerships, your career. And then the M is mindfully prepare. How are you acting on that intention? What is your mindset going to be like? And what are the practices that you're instilling? Advancing your understanding. And that's really through, the knowledge that you need to not just only get through your pregnancy, get through your birth, but postpartum, that
Mhm.
transition that's going to happen there. And then in life, after you have the baby and now you're a parent, understanding your own health implications. What are those wellness, well-being factors that we need to make sure that we're keeping in mind? are rise with strength through movement. So that's the physical, which most people are good at. Um, and then T, thrive together. And that's the connection, the support, the practices to keep this intentional. And all of this combined, is just a strategic, intentional approach to how we live our lives. And then that goes in line with us being able to be a better partner, a better mother, a better leader in our jobs, with our teams, and everywhere else.
Absolutely. It's so true. I love how you reinvented the SMART acronym. That's pretty incredible. So, Michelle, you've gone through some pretty powerful personal shifts along your journey. Tell us what they have taught you about what it really means to rise, especially when you're in the messy middle of motherhood, career, and the identity piece of who am I?
Biggest thing for me is that my definition of success has evolved. So what it means to rise, be successful, be as powerful, still be as ambitious, in the old version of me, that meant, the promotions, the titles, getting the specific opportunities and, all of the parts that go along with that.
Mhm.
Um, Now the new evolved version of me and I'm still evolving. I'm still becoming a better person every day. That's the goal. Now it's about the impact. And let's think about that from all walks of life. Somebody might take that word and say, oh, great. Yes. Let's use the pharmaceutical industry. We are working in our jobs and we're here to help all patients, right? At the end of the day, we're all trying to impact. But what about the impact from an overall, you as a person, as a human being, being this leader, this manager, this parent, this mentor, this coach, this advisor? What is the true significant impact of what you're doing every day? And I think being able to do that with integrity and presence, because we have to come back to our internal systems. What does being impactful while keeping your peace looks like? That to me is the answer to your question.
It's incredible. I love the way you phrase that. The impact is really important. And part of the work that I do too, it's how do we put that in perspective of what is the impact you actually want to have in the various facets of your life, which then helps you create the goals around it and making sure that you are laser focused on what
Yes.
actually matters and not getting distracted by the noise. But what I hear you saying is really that shift from the external validation of the external goals to our internal voice and inner knowing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And, if I use the example of working with pregnant families, we're very big, when you meet families and typical situation is that they're like, okay, you get hired and they're all focused on the external, right? Okay, let's sit and have a birth plan ready. Absolutely. Where do you want to have your baby? What do you want to have in the room, et cetera, et cetera. And we're going through the list, right? That's not the first step for me though. The first step is usually me asking both, the members in the couple, the partners, whatever the family dynamics are. And I say, okay, the first question, how do you feel right now? What are some of the things that are coming up for you? And how do you want to feel? Because then we know how much work we have to do internally before we can work on the external. And that's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. That makes so much sense. So much sense. I love that. So, Michelle, what would you say to the woman who is listening, who is exhausted from trying to do it all and still feels like she's failing? Because we're juggling all the things career, motherhood, household, like you said, relationships. What is one message you want her to hear or take away from today's episode?
Honor your ambitions, but do it with presence. And what does that mean? We can do it all, but what's the one thing we want to focus on at the moment so that we can keep our peace? The checklist will never end. It will
Hmm.
keep going. And we should stop striving to balance it all. Just stop. If you do not get something accomplished today, that's fine. Be present, accept it, acknowledge it, and then we just move on, right? We shift, we adapt. We're very good at doing that. We just need to tap into it a little bit better, of course. Um, but we should really try to honor our energy what I call force fields when I work with folks. I say, we have to honor your force field. Don't let anyone come in. We are all walking around with loads of energy around us. How do we want to direct that energy
And
so that
protect it,
we
right?
don't react
Yeah.
versus response? So
Yeah.
again, it's not even specific to, having a baby or having a career, or it's really us as a person, as a human. And once we sort of work all of those and our force field and our energy is stable, the shifts that come along the way, we're better able to respond to it, right? We're a little bit more
Absolutely.
intentional. And so that's really the biggest message that I always say. Really, really honor that energy and instill practices that will keep the peace within you.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's great advice. And just before we wrap up, Michelle, what would you say was the one shift that really changed everything for you?
I would say, because it's not like I didn't have a good career and, it was very successful. I was literally at the peak of it when I decided to make the move that I made. We mentioned earlier, I had a lot of signs along the way, right? They're little nuggets that always tell you, are you really supposed to be in this moment right now? And whether that was when I was pregnant or
Mhm.
not. But I would say the biggest shift was when I started seeing the impact on my kids, how they react and respond. And if I think about each of my individual pregnancies and the energy that I had and the focus of that energy within each of those 3 pregnancies, and now that they're here on earth, on the earth side, and how they are and how they're able to react versus response, I absolutely attributed that to the energy that I had while I was pregnant with them. And so when, one of our kids had her own challenges, that was when I really, you learn so many things along the way. I knew a lot of stuff, but it's like you just sit there and everything just sort of comes into one big bubble for you. And I thought, oh, this is it.
Yeah.
That's when I said to myself, okay, this is what all of this means. I was
Yeah.
meant to do this or learn this, etc. And again, going back to the impact of what you want to have for your kids, right? What is that legacy that you want to leave for them? And in that moment, I thought, I really don't want my kids to ever grow up and then we're all long gone and they only know their parents as, hustling. Like people think hustling is only for entrepreneurs. No, no, everybody's hustling in their own way. And,
Yeah. We get stuck and trapped in the hustle and the
yes, in corporate
busyness.
America, it is a
Absolutely.
serious hustle.
Absolutely.
And I didn't want to be the hustler.
Yeah. You were done.
I was like, no. And so that's why I'm so intentional about helping people who were like me. Like, you don't have to be in the hustle. And that doesn't mean that you have to quit your job and do something else. That's not what I'm saying. It's more about, okay, here are some of the practices that I learned along the way that helped me be even more successful that I didn't do back then. So can you imagine if you start doing it now, what would that look like?
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. So, two really powerful things. You brought tears to my eyes that you said. One is listening to the signs along the way, because I know for years, and I know many women do the same, we ignore, we neglect, we, reflect on it for a minute and then we're on to the next thing. We intellectualize it, right? It's so really tuning into what those signs are and getting
Hmm.
curious. And then the other thing you said, which is really impactful, is the legacy piece, which I'm also huge on because I have 2 girls. And, what is the legacy we're leaving behind? What is the model that we are creating for
Exactly.
them to copy?
I
And
love that word, model.
yeah, when you step back and really look at how you're living your life and you think about, is this how I want them to live their life? It definitely puts it in a very different perspective. So,
Absolutely. It's not about the money. It's not about, the financial aspects of it, but it's taking everything
yeah,
holistically into account and the impact that we're trying to create for them to then be better future leaders because they are the ones that are going to be taking over this world.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We got to set them up for success, holistic
Yes.
success.
Yes. Yes.
Incredible. Michelle, this has been such an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for joining us and being here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the
Really appreciate it.
invitation.
Where can our listeners find you?
Yes. Well, I hope that this conversation resonated with some. And if it did, know that you don't have to choose between your personal identity, your parental identity, the meaningful work that you're already doing. And so if you feel like this resonated, I would love to connect if you're in that season of change. And you can schedule time with me. My website is smartparentingwithmichelle.com. Our services are also, the offerings that we have are listed at yogamazia.com. Either way, would love to connect.
Amazing. Thank you again, Michelle, for being here, for sharing your insight, your story, and your expertise. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Now go make shift happen. Take care. All right, Shifter, that's a wrap on today's episode of What the Shift. But here's the thing. Awareness is just the first step. The real shift happens when you decide to do something with it. So before you go back to business as usual, ask yourself, what is one thing you are done carrying? What's one shift you're ready to make? And if this episode hit home, don't keep it to yourself. Hit subscribe, leave a review, and send it to a woman who needs to hear this, because we shift together. Remember, you don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to take the next step. And I'll be right here next week, ready to shift with you. This is What the Shift, and we are just getting started.